The Overland Route, the Transcon, and the Sunset Route, all legendary monikers for legendary railroads. While the western United States has many, one road in the east stands out from the rest, the Water Level Route, the glorious backbone of the famed New York Central Railroad. Today, the Water Level Route serves as the Chicago line for both CSX and Norfolk Southern as a result of the Conrail split, with the NS flag flying high over the busier western end from Cleveland to Chicago. In this rail fanning trilogy, we'll be taking a detailed look at the Indiana segment of the line, from the open fields near the Ohio border to the industrial heart of Chicagoland. This is a detailed and comprehensive look into one of America's proudest railroads, the Chicago Line, a railroad superhighway presented by the Thornapple River Rail Series. .421 miles from Buffalo, New York, Elkhart is NS's primary terminal handling traffic in or out of Chicagoland. By locating its yard facilities outside of the dense Chicago region, they find no interference with other railroads and find plenty of space to spread things out. However, this intermodal has a non-stop pass, cleared to sweep around the curve on the new alignment and continue west on Track 1. Until late 2017, trains used a much different set of alignments to round the curve past the station. In this scene from 2015, another run-through intermodal is on Track 1, but this time heads under the legendary signal bridge and along the original station platform. The original alignments held mains 1 and 2 separate from the other lines and along the station platform, while the North Freight and South Freight split off in the curve and past the station farther to the south. Adding to the already busy interlocking is the Kalamazoo branch, used by the NS to interchange with the Elkhart and Western and by the Grand Elk Railroad. The old setup created many challenges, primarily in the realm of maintenance. The diamond and turnouts in the curve limited how much super elevation or banking could be stuffed under the tracks, limiting train speeds. Additionally, maintaining non-standard curve turnouts and the diamond was a headache, and so NS completely reconstructed the interlocking in 2017. Next up behind Amtrak was this westbound Canadian Pacific Autorack, which will follow from above to view the new interlocking plant in full. After passing under the new 3-track signal cantilever to enter the control point, they enter the curve and address the station. With no more switches or diamonds within the curve, NS engineers have added plenty of super elevation, allowing the higher train speeds through the curve. After passing beneath the new signal bridge, they pass an eastbound manifest who is waiting for clearance to depart the yard. After cutting over to the new arrangement, it would be several months before NS completed the removal of the old mainline tracks, and as of mid-2018, the old signal bridge continues to stand as a monument to the railroad's historical and continued importance to this city. Eventually, it became apparent as to why the eastbound manifest was holding as this westbound strolls over to the North Yard freight lead off of Track 3. While the new layout may be exciting and better for operations and maintenance, gone are the days of trains arriving and departing underneath the iconic signal bridge. At the other end of the yard, Control Point 426 acts as the western sister to CP 421. In July of 2015, we caught this eastbound intermodal heading for a crew change on Track 1 under the direction of the legacy signal equipment. Unlike the Elkhart to Goshen corridor, the western throat of Elkhart needed no significant upgrades, and so CP 426 received only new signals in this time frame. In fact, it was already configured essentially the same way as today's CP 421, with a double ladder layout allowing trains to pull in and off the main line simultaneously. Two years later, those new PTC-equipped signals have taken over, guiding this freshly recrewed Canadian Pacific westward. Between Elkhart and South Bend is the town of Mishawaka, which has long kept a quiet zone over the railroad, with no horns sounding over the numerous grade crossings along this segment of the railroad. Without four-quadrant gates or even crossing bells, the zone is grandfathered in when it comes to FRA regulations. It sure can be an odd experience for anyone accustomed to plenty of audible warnings from approaching trains. Control Point 435 marks the end of the quiet zone and the eastern end of South Bend. The highlight here, until it was replaced in 2017, was this New York Central style cantilever signal bridge, a unique design with very few examples ever constructed this far west. Heading westward at last light, this intermodal has examples of just about every type of intermodal equipment, from piggyback trailers to domestic double stacks, with a few tank containers thrown in for good measure. Through the downtown area, Canadian National's Chicago to Port Huron main line crosses over the NS, the only major crossing of another railroad for the Chicago line between East Chicago and Toledo. Using a series of crossovers to waddle the CN over the NS, Control Point 437 isn't easily accessible due to the area's grade separation. However, the Amtrak station platforms on the west side of downtown provide access to the tracks for this meet between an eastbound manifest and a westbound stacker. Between South Bend and Hudson Lake, the Chicago South Shore and South Bend Railroad parallels the Chicago line. Just west of our previous location, the electric passenger railroad branch to the South Bend Airport joins up with the original right-of-way along the NS. At Lydic, the railroad once again has free and open running that will last for the next 40 miles before Porter Junction. Alongside, the South Shore is marked by their overhead catenary and power lines as a westbound autorack moves along on clear signals. Another manifest follows along not too far behind, with a track-level camera demonstrating just how dynamic even heavy mainline track can be under load. Late on a frosty midwinter's afternoon, another westbound intermodal cruises toward another clear signal at control point 448. A 100 feet to the north, a South Shore commuter train races east, knocking down their own clear indication. The next crossing down is at control point 448, where the crossovers are joined by spurs off to the Gavilan grain elevator and the Intech steel facility. Of course, for most trains, these just add scenery as they roll by without delay. While the grain elevator sees an occasional unit train, the Intech steel plant sees daily unit trains. NS runs a turn of empty steel coil flats back down to the Chicago area mills every day, typically returning in the afternoon. We find the loaded train here with around 200 steel coils as they make the turn off the main line and descend into the plant's own receiving yard. From here, the plant switcher will handle the unloading movements, and eventually this steel will be transformed into a number of different products for any number of imaginable applications. In addition to the NS, there is of course the South Shore running just to the north, which also sees regular local freight traffic via a separate freight company which also uses the traditional South Shore name. And of course there are plentiful commuter trains running regularly throughout the day. At New Carlisle, the railroad enters the central time zone and encounters a series of modest hills and curves in contrast to the straight and flat running afforded since South Bend. In the late afternoon, we found a 12-hour late Lakeshore Limited, delayed by lake effect snows in New York, but now running along at track speed through the reverse curves. In contrast to the light and nimble passenger trains, freight trains climbing the hill don't usually make it without a hit to their velocity as experienced by this westbound empty crude oil drag. It's just another reason why it is hard to keep passenger trains running on time, with this speed differential allowing Amtrak trains to rapidly catch up to slower freight trains ahead. Right after the South Shore cleared our view, another intermodal cruises down the hill on the Chicago line with a mile-long wall of domestic 53-foot containers. Hudson Lake is home to a South Shore station and is the last place the two railroads are parallel until Burns Harbor. From the South Shore parking lot, one can see the Chicago line where trains fly over the roadway. On the South Shore side, we then caught an eastbound commuter run, which will stop to drop off 2 people before continuing the icy run to South Bend. Thanks to the frigid winter weather, the leading car's bell is frozen and unable to ring, emitting only a modest ticking of the mechanism as they resume eastward movement. Between Hudson Lake and Rolling Prairie, Control Point 453 was recently installed to give the dispatcher an additional universal crossover between New Carlisle and LaPorte. Steaming east, this intermodal train sweeps around the curve out of the afternoon winter sun. Underpowered, this lengthy intermodal was battling it out with gravity as they made their way west. A winter edition of the scene features this BNSF-led intermodal as they cruise through the rolling farmland. Rolling Prairie is one of those town names that pretty accurately describes the area. Here we find this eastbound manifest with a Ferromex GE third in line. The town of LaPorte was, like many locations in this series, home to old signal bridges until recently, when they were replaced by new PTC-capable color lights. While both ends of the siding had bridges, the west end at Control Point 466 is easily the most photogenic. With a westbound Canadian Pacific ethanol train on the approach, the signal upgrades to clear at the last minute, allowing the engineer to keep in the throttle as they approach Otis Hill. Late 2017 saw the demise of the old bridge and the institution of the new cantilever, which stands noticeably higher over the rails for this eastbound loaded grain train. Warmer days find this eastbound coil steel train destined for Intech at New Carlisle. From the air, it's easy to follow as they approach the city of LaPorte. Otis Hill is the Chicago Line's ascent out of the immediate Lake Michigan basin over the series of hills which make up the Valparaiso moraine left over by the glaciers that carved out the lake. In railroad terms, that means eastbounds climbing hard and westbounds receiving a free coast down to Chesterton. In the hamlet of Otis itself, the local population is easily outnumbered by Amtrak 4 times per day, with this edition of the Capital Limited due to stop short of the bumper at Union Station just over an hour from now. Running on approach signals due to a crawling coal train ahead, this relatively light intermodal waltzes up the hill rather easily. At milepost 474, the morning run of empties from Intech heads towards Chesterton, also running on approach signals due to traffic starting to back up ahead at Porte Junction. With wind chills reading near zero, this westbound CP autorack, with a pair of SD60s leading, is also cruising slowly towards Porte. They accept an approach indication from the new control point 479, instructing them to stop short at Chesterton to await their turn through Porte and on into Chicagoland. The control point here was built as the easternmost project of the Indiana Gateway program, and the eastbound signal cantilever hints at the consideration of a future third main track. For now, there are no firm plans for expansion, as this pair of BNSF SD70 ACEs drags along 18,000 tons worth of coal train in a futile attempt to keep track speed leading up to Otis Hill. In the final part, we'll pick things up at Porter Junction, the busiest junction on the railroad, where 3 other lines join the water level route. We will then continue westwards to finish out our journey with scenes from places such as Ogden Dunes, Gary, and Whiting before our conclusion at the Calumet River Bridge. Be sure to click through to that, and don't forget to leave a like and subscribe if you enjoyed this video. As always, leave any questions down in the comments below. This has been a special edition of the Thornapple River Rail series created by Alex Christmas and copyright 2018, all rights reserved.